hypothetical, imagined worldview, and that's because really the whole position is absurd and imagined. I mean, I'm arguing a very specific thing about transcendentals in this
the
world.
machine I'm talking to you about are human beings. It's not an absurd world. The world I'm talking about
That's a
is
paradigm
real world.
assumption that you think humans are merely biological machines.
Yep. Do you have evidence that I'm made of anything else than an atom, than a set of molecules?
This is ridiculous. You believe you wrote your book. So your book was the work of JF and JF's mind, right? It wasn't the process of a determined machine, right?
It was the process of a determined machine. It was the process of the neurons in my mind.
You didn't have, and you're not making your own arguments right now. They're just a chemical determined process.
Absolutely.
So you're not making arguments. Thank you. I've won the debate. I mean, isn't this interesting? This is what the atheist has to fall back on, is this most absurd, hypothetical, imagined worldview. And that's because really the whole position is absurd and imagined. I mean, I'm arguing a very specific thing about transcendentals in this world.
The machine I'm talking to you about are human beings. It's not an absurd world. The world I'm talking about
That's a
is
paradigm
real world.
assumption that you think humans are merely biological machines.
Yep. Do you have evidence that I'm made of anything else than an atom, than a set of molecules?
This is ridiculous. You believe you wrote your book. So your book was the work of JF and JF's mind, right? It wasn't the process of a determined machine, right?
It was the process of a determined machine. It was the process of the neurons in my mind.
You didn't have, and you're not making your own arguments right now. They're just a chemical determined process.
Absolutely.
So you're not making arguments. Thank you. I've won the debate.
All right. Bye.
The scientific method cannot justify the scientific method. Therefore, it itself is a dogmatic religious presupposition.
Okay, well, I look forward to it. I heard your debate with Nicholas Fuentes, and I thought that was very entertaining, and so I respect your debate skills, that's for sure.
Well, thank you. I've yet to lose a debate, actually.
Brzezinski model, the technocrat model, is much more interested in the incremental, slow kill, Fabian approach to bringing technocracy into being. So they're not going to send Homeland Security troops to round you up and put you in a FEMA camp. They'd much rather promote everybody being enmeshed in video games, the Disney gulag, the virtual reality gulag, all this kind of stuff is a much better FEMA camp in your home. They don't need the FEMA camp. It's too messy. It's a big ordeal. And so all the nonsense of all the patriot crap on the radio, that's not going to happen. They don't need to. The shadow global government is already here. And as we said, it's in the latter stages of the mopping up process to move it into the next phase, i.e. between two pages, the next page.
This isn't this interesting. This is what the atheist has to fall back on. Is this most absurd, hypothetical, imagined worldview, and that's because really the whole position is absurd and imagined. I mean, I'm arguing a very specific thing about transcendentals in this
the
world.
Machine I'm talking to you about are human beings. It's not an absurd world. The world I'm talking about
That's a
is
paradigm
real world.
assumption that you think humans are merely biological machines.
Yep. Do you have evidence that I'm made of anything else
book.
than an atom, than a set of molecules?
This is ridiculous. You believe you wrote your book. So your book was the work of JF and JF's mind, right? It wasn't the process of a determined machine, right?
It was the process of a determined machine. It was the process of the neurons in my mind.
You didn't have, and you're not making your own arguments right now. They're just a chemical determined process.
Absolutely.
So you're not making arguments. Thank you. I've won the debate.
All right. Bye.
The scientific method cannot justify the scientific method. Therefore, it itself is a dogmatic religious presupposition.
Okay, well, I look forward to it. I heard your debate with Nicholas Fuentes, and I thought that was very entertaining, and so I respect your debate skills, that's for sure.
Well, thank you. I've yet to lose a debate, actually.
All right, welcome. What's up, nerds? You're watching Jay's analysis. And so I just made a comedy video that is really weird. And as usual, people are mystified. They're like, why are you making comedic videos? This channel is supposed to be all about philosophy and theology. I am not happy with you. Bruh, we've been making goofy videos since I started this channel. First videos on this channel were goofy videos. I'm very happy with that. It's kind of like a take on PewDiePie style, but if
It was Yakov Smirnoff meets Mystery Science Theater meets Mr. Hyde. So it's like all those things in one. And if you don't like the comedic stuff, then don't watch it. But anyway, so thank God we're still here. Everything's running smooth. I was a little nervous yesterday when we were trying to start this up. You can imagine why. And thought, well, crap. But everything's good. There was no problems with the live streams. On my end, it was all on the end of Google. So we're back. Remind everybody we are taking super chats. I want to remind you too that I will be at the Texas event with Aaron and Melissa of TrueStream. So let's see, when's they're going to be at the Alamo Draft House, June. Let me get the dates right. So they're going to be premiering what the heck is going on? Okay, yeah, I just want this image to put up for you for your leisure. So I'll be at this with them, some other prominent individuals. Not that I'm necessarily prominent. The prominent individuals will be there along with myself, who is a C-tier prominent. I'm a C-tier prominent individual. So Minds of Men, they're going to have it at the Draft House, Alamo Draft House. So you can come watch it there. You can meet them, get signed DVDs. I'll be there signing books. If you've missed me at the last month Austin meetup with Boiler Room Crew, you can come meet us there. Now, I think it may sell out this showing, July 2nd. Don't worry if it sells out, because you can hang out with everybody afterwards if you don't make it to the actual movie event. So I think other individuals might show up, like Catherine Austin Fitz. I'm still in the mode of doing my ridiculous character from earlier. And people think, are you on drugs? Dude, I've been doing goofy characters this whole time. You don't have to do drugs to do goofy characters. So anyway, you want to talk to my manager and you want a refund. Why do you want to talk to my manager and do a refund? So anyway, we're gonna pick back up with Sirach. We're on 35. Where are my cuck glasses? I need my cuck glasses to stare at these screens all day. Just one second. Okay. Now I can look like I work at BuzzFeed for you with my BuzzFeed glasses. All right. Now everybody be nice in the chat. Everybody smooch each other. Don't be angry. Thank you, Miss Dearance. $1. Yes. So if you want to support, be sure and support me, so we can keep doing this. Don't know how long what's going to be going on. Could be going on. What's with could be happening and going ons could not be goings on and happenings in the what's with tomorrows. Who knows? But thank God we're still here. So also at Jay's Analysis, you will see, if you want to subscribe in the cool millennial way, you can use the Bitcoins and the Litecoins. I have added to the site the easiest way I know how to do it. I'll probably eventually add some kind of wallet, specifically. Anyway, but I'll be at this event. If you want to come to this here event, it'll be fun if you're in the Austin, Texas area.
Boiler Room will be there. At Catherine Austin Fitz, Aaron and Melissa. I don't know who else. Probably some other people show up too. So that'll be fun. And of course, if you don't know, I'm the author of Esoteric Hollywood 1 and Deuce. 1 and Deuce. Deuce is out. You can get that here at my website. And as I said, if you want to subscribe to Jay's Analysis in the way the cool kids do it, there's the Litecoin address. I think I have the Litecoin address below as well, or the Bitcoin address. If not, I'll add it here. Because I think that the cryptos are going to catch on. The crypto camel toe is going to be catching on, and everybody's going to be doing this in the future. Have you heard of this? Have you heard of the cryptos? Cryptocurrency is what the kids are going to be doing in the future. They'll be buying their foods. Shut up, ads. They'll be buying all of their ring pops, their Lickamades.
Are you tired of itchy?
Oh my gosh, stop. Where are my crypto address? Where's that at? Maybe it's here. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So I'm going to add that too. So in other words, you can subscribe. Now, if you subscribe, because it's not like automated yet, if you want to use Bitcoin or Litecoin and you want to subscribe to Jay's Analysis that way, or buy the book through that, you can just shoot me a message and show me that you're the person that sent it. That way it's completely anonymous because I have all the info of who sent it. No, I'm joking. Let me add the crypto wallets there. So, all right. So I've added that. You can subscribe to Jay's Analysis or buy books or whatever with Litecoin or Bitcoin. So yeah, that's cool. That'll work. And then of course you can buy the book. The shop was down a little bit the other day because of WordPress plugin issue. So I had to fix one of the plugins and the shop's back up. So it was only down for a couple hours. No big deal. But in this climate, any little thing makes us all nervous. And yeah, like remember I was telling you, we don't know how long we're going to have what we have. We can't have nice things anymore. Can't have nice things. You can't have nice things. Bad boy. Bad you. Bad kid. Bad boy. You can't have nice things. Yes, I've heard of the Jack Parsons TV show. Strange Angel. Jay, what is your opinion on Jordan Maxwell? My opinion is that he saw a flying pterodactyl, and there is a very true, accurate video of Jordan Maxwell where he sees a pterodactyl flying over Los Angeles. And it's true, it existed, and he has, the pterodactyl had the gullet of Jordan Maxwell. There's actually a clip that's funny of Jordan Maxwell saying that he saw pterodactyls flying over Los Angeles. And I believe I've solved this mystery because I don't think he's lying. I actually saw, if you watch the movie War Games, the scientist in War Games, he's flying a pterodactyl remote controlled RCA airplane that looks like a pterodactyl. And if you were far away and you saw this thing, you would think that that was a pterodactyl. I mean, if you were a conspiracy theorist and you thought that there were actually pterodactyls, that's what you would think. If you were not a conspiracy theorist, you would see this and say, what the heck kind of bird is that? That bird is crazy. But it's not a pterodactyl. It is a remote controlled. Yes, you can send me crypto for boats and hoes. Thank you. Goes directly into the tax-free boats and hose fund. And all the reviews are pouring in. As I said, Esoteric Hollywood 2. I dropped a deuce. Get it? Esoteric Hollywood 2 is better than Esoteric Hollywood 1. Anyway, also, I would like to mention the subscription service No, I already did that. Tutoring. So now that I'm back home, I'm going to catch up on tutoring. I know several people have messaged me. You want to do tutoring? I know. The easiest way to do tutoring is to sign up through Patreon. So you can sign up for the tutoring through the Patreon. And yes, if you want to do it a different way, we can do it. You can do it through the crypto or through just message me directly or whatever. But it's getting to where there's a lot of messages, so it's hard for me to keep up with all the messages. So if you want to do it, the most likely way to get my attention is to set it up through Patreon. And I have quite a few people that are doing philosophy tutoring right now, so it takes me a while to kind of get down the list. But I can get you scheduled, and you can sign up for the different tiers on Patreon. No, Jay's Analysis doesn't have a forum. Jay's Analysis doesn't have anything other than the subscription and members service. So I guess there could be a forum, but I mean, I also have the Discord and I have the Facebook group and all that, just to have all these, different backups. And I did stream yesterday on Twitch. I'm thinking I need to, rebuild. Well, not rebuild, but get the Twitch going. So I'll be doing that, maybe more on the side. I don't think I'm too far from I got 150 subscribers at Twitch, and I got to do some more streaming there. And that's just fun to kind of chill and do, talk philosophy and that kind of stuff. So there's the Twitch in the chat there if you want to subscribe to that, if you enjoy games. But we don't just play games, we have really in-depth conversations. So we did that yesterday when the YouTube streaming was down. Be good to have that as a backup. So if you want to follow me on Twitch, and I play the Boomer games like Medicare, and somebody said that I need to have a sit-down discussion about conspiracies with Medicare. That'd be cool. Definitely be cool. Apparently that came up on one of his streams. Also, watch my new video that I just put up. It's funny, I think. I think it's funny. Some people don't get it. Well, if you don't get my weird humor, then don't watch it. But we've always been here doing weird humor from the get-go. And if you would like to subscribe to Jay's Analysis for the full talks, lectures, interviews, and podcasts, videos, all the part twos, also available if you subscribe through Patreon or through the website, through credit card, PayPal, any of that stuff. It's all available now. We've moved up into the fancy categories of all that kind of stuff. We can do all that now. And this is part 3 of Sirach, the book that the Protestants decided was no good and they tossed it out. So, yes, the title is Lost Wisdom, Lost Books, and we're speaking here specifically to clickbait you into thinking that this is some stupid Gnostic thing. It's not. It's actually about biblical books, but these biblical books have essentially been forgotten. Did you know that when people go on Jeopardy, is that still a thing? I don't know if Jeopardy still exists, but when it did, all the Jeopardy dorks would study all these questions, and they would get to the point where a Bible question would come up, and none of the nerds knew any Bible questions ever, like really, really simple stuff. And you would think just from an educational standpoint, you would know the biblical stuff, but people don't know anything. And I would venture that is still the case. So, I know that this series took longer than I thought, as it always does. But there's not too much. I think there's only 15 chapters left. I think we only go to 50? Yeah, Sirach goes to 51. So we'll try to clear that up pretty quick here. And then I think the next thing that we're going to do is this globalist book here. Which is Turning Point by Frito Tortilla's Turning Point, which is an important globalist book about scientism. And basically, I think what we're getting at here is the idea that, well, since scientism broke down all of the traditions Now we can rebuild the world in the new model of a new age scientism hybrid. And so Frito is going to tell us how to do that. Dorito Capra. Now, like I said, come to this Minds of Men, really cool. See my autographed Minds of Men. You can come get an autographed Minds of Men if you come. And again, even if you don't make it, if I mean, it's already going to sell out. I'm telling you that right now. This thing's selling out for sure. They told me like 3 days ago it was almost sold out. But you can sign up on their website for that. But even if you can't come to the showing, you can come hang out with everybody. It'll be a big ass party, bro. All right, so let's get into Sirach. We're on about, I think, chapter 35, and then we'll move on to Dorito Capra and the scientific new age of genetically modified Dorito creatures. Let's see, I think we did acceptable offerings, so God's justice and mercy, 35:11. Don't try to bribe God, for he will not accept your bribes. Do not offer an unrighteous sacrifice. God will judge us. There is no partiality with God. He will not show partiality to the poor, but he will hear the petition of the man who is wronged. So notice that just because you broke, you still have to follow the law. Like, you don't get a free pass. You don't get a get out of jail free just because you broke. Just because you ain't got bank. Still got to do what's right, bro. But if you're wronged, God will hear your supplications. God will not overlook the supplication of the orphan nor the widow. Do not the tears of a widow run down her cheeks, and she cries against the man who has caused them. He whose service is pleasing to the Lord will be accepted by him, and his prayer will reach the clouds. The prayer of the humble man passes through the clouds, and he will comfort, and he will not be in comfort until that prayer reaches the Lord. This, by the way, is why the Orthodox do the practice. If you give alms to the poor, typically speaking, in the Orthodox tradition, you ask that poor person to pray for you, because this scripture says God hears the prayers of the poor and the widow and the orphan. God provides justice for the righteous, and he executes judgment. The Lord will not delay, neither will he be slow to help them, for he crushes the loins of the unmerciful. He repays vengeance upon the nations. So notice that God's standards, God's chastisement is not just for Israel, it's for all the nations. And this is consistently taught throughout the prophets, that everyone is bound to the moral law, not just the Israelites. God crushes the scepter of the unrighteous. And by the way, that shows that he expects entire nations to obey the moral law. You can't get away with disobeying the moral law. And that applies across all spheres of society. Let's see. God will judge the case of his people, and he will bring them joy with his mercy. Mercy is beautiful in the time of his affliction, like the rain in the time of drought. Doctrine is consistently spoken of symbolically and allegorically as water. Doctrine drips down like water, and it feeds the plants, and then life springs forth. Chapter 36, have mercy on us, O Lord. Look upon us, and put your fear upon all the nations. So all the nations have a duty, again, to the one true God. Raise your hand against all the foreign nations, and let them see your power, and in us who have been sanctified before them. So in them may you be made great before us. In this, again, many texts in the Old Testament speak of the conversion of the Gentiles. And there are countless numbers of those in the Old Testament predicting the days when the Gentile nations would convert to the true God. This is very important and shows that the Messiah came because he's bringing the nations to the worship of the true God. For there is no God but you, Lord, and therefore renew your signs and work fresh wonders. Glorify your hand and your right arm. Stir up your anger and pour out your wrath. Drive away the adversary and destroy the enemy. This is an imprecatory prayer, and we still pray in the liturgy imprecatory prayers. Now, typically, somebody like C.S. Lewis is okay. I mean, he's got some really interesting, insightful type stuff. But one of the things that C.S. Lewis got wrong that's always bothered me is if you read his book on the Psalms, he can't figure out how he's got this Marcionite trend in his theology where he can't figure out how we can still pray imprecatory psalms in the New Testament period. Well, that's called Marcionism. The church in her liturgy prays imprecatory prayers against her enemies. And so we don't cross these things out. These things haven't changed. As I've been telling you, if you look at the blessings and curses of Deuteronomy 28, and then when you read the Apocalypse chapters 2 and 3, Jesus continues that principle of covenant blessings and curses to the church, the covenant community. And just as he promised blessings and cursings to Israel in Deuteronomy 28, based on obedience and disobedience, so he promises blessings and cursings to the church based on obedience and disobedience in Apocalypse 2 and 3. He tells each one of those churches, he says, I've looked at your works. This you've done good. This you got a problem with. Get this straight, and I'll bless you. He says to another church, I'm going to bring a judgment. I'm going to put some of you into temptation, or not temptation, into tribulation. There's going to be a testing period. He says, the woman who's teaching heresies, I'm going to cast her into a sickbed and give her a time to repent. He says, if you do this, your enemies will come and submit before you. I will make you strong. Exactly all the same covenant curses and promises of Deuteronomy 28. Exactly. And by the way, all throughout the Apocalypse, you have a completely consistent presentation with the apocalyptic literature of Daniel, Zechariah, Ezekiel, in the Old Testament apocalyptic literature. There's a total continuity. And with Matthew 24 and Luke 21. It's not discontinuity. It's really just ignorance and lack of biblical understanding that fails to see and to grasp the continuity between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And that's why we've done many, many talks on this, is because it's important to understand this, lest we fall into the tendency of Marcionism. So many people fall into Marcionism, which is a form of Gnosticism. And in fact, in St. John of Damascus's list of heresies, I just retweeted this from a tweet from, a year ago, remember? That John Damascus, when he's recounting the heresies, we're talking about veganism and the weird Gnostic views, called the Incretites. The Incretites were an early church heresy that taught radical veganism and said that this was mandated. And John Damascus calls it a heresy because he says the Incretites came from Marcionites. They're a sect that split from the Marcionites. And what did Marcion say? He said the Old Testament God is the mean God, and he's different from the New Testament love God. This is what most people think in their idiocy. They think that the Old Testament mean God is different from the New Testament love God. This is what many so-called Orthodox people think. I've seen heretical bishops say that the Old Testament God is a different God. So-called Orthodox bishops say this. That's Marcionism. Marcionism is explicitly condemned from the time of Marcion, early on, all the way up to the Sixth Council. The Sixth Council lists him in their heresiology, all the way up to John Damascus listing Marcion in his heresiology. So imprecatory prayers are a great example of why we're not Marcionites. So God blesses his people when they're obedient, and he curses their enemies. But if his people disobey, he chastises his people by letting the enemies rule over them. It's very simple. It's not that difficult. Let him who survives be devoured in the wrath. May him who causes harm to your people meet destruction. Crush the heads of the rulers of the enemy, right? That's an imprecatory prayer. Just like the head of the serpent gets crushed. In the Apocalypse, what do we see? We see the saints under the altar doing imprecatory prayers in heaven, praying for vengeance upon earth.
Gather together all the tribes of Jacob and grant them their inheritance from the beginning. Have mercy upon your people, O Lord, and those who are called by your name. Have mercy on Israel, whom you have likened to your firstborn son. Right? Israel is the firstborn son because it's a picture of Christ, the true firstborn son of Israel. Have pity on your sanctuary and your city, Jerusalem, the place of your rest, Zion. Fill her with the celebration of your divine virtue and your people with your glory. Give testimony to what you created in the beginning. Raise up the prophecy spoken in your name. Reward those who wait for you, and let your prophets be found trustworthy. Hear, O Lord, the prayer of your suppliants, according to the blessings of Aaron upon your people, and all the earth will know that you are the Lord, the God of the ages. And that prayer was fulfilled when the Messiah came, who fulfilled all of these typical offices of the Old Testament. Prophet, priest, king, all fulfilled in the character of Christ. That's why he has Davidic lineage. He's kingly. He's prophetic in the sense that he was given the spirit of prophecy. And he's priestly in that he's a priest after the order of Melchizedek. So he is prophet, priest, and king. He fulfills those three Old Testament roles. That doesn't mean, by the way, that all this stuff dies. There's no more civil authority anymore because Jesus came. All of these dumb either ors that people have in their head. Where do you get these dumb either ors? The New Testament is very clear in many cases. What does Paul say in Romans 13? Caesar bears the sword. How does Daniel treat Nebuchadnezzar as the authority? How does Joseph treat Pharaoh as the state authority? Go listen to the whole talk we did on church and state. Using your discernment. The stomach eats any kinds of food, but some food are better than other foods. The palate tastes the flavor of meat, and so an understanding heart detects lying words. A crooked heart causes grief, but a man of great experience will pay him back. A woman will accept any son, but one daughter is better than another. A beautiful woman gladdens a man's face and surpasses his every desire. If there is mercy and gentleness on her tongue, her husband is not like other men. He who gains a wife gets a great possession, a helper like him and a pillar of support. Where there is no wall, the property is plundered. You hear that? So there is such a thing as rights, as privacy. Privacy, we saw that earlier in the text, that you have a right to privacy. You have a right to defend yourself and your possessions. The law of God has always, in Exodus, it gives you the right to self-defense. So these rights that the West has erroneously come to think are natural rights. Depends on what you mean by natural. But the only way that you're guaranteed those rights is if you are made in the image of God and that there is a law of God that you follow. Without that, there's no guarantee of these rights. Nature doesn't teach you that you have these, quote, rights. Nature is predator versus prey. So the only way to ground your ethics, to ground your basis for beliefs in rights, is, we could say, natural revelation, but not natural law and not natural theology. But notice that the author, Jesus ben Sirach, does say that we can have private property. And if there is no wall, then you get plundered. Very common sense here. Who will trust a well-equipped thief who runs from city to city? Who will trust a man who has no home and who lodges wherever night overtakes him? Yeah, don't be a wandering bum, right? The millennial lifestyle of tiny living. That's stupid, dude. That's engineered for you. I'm gonna roam around in an Airstream that I got for cheap. That's like really tiny, and I'm just gonna eat branches and grass and be vegan and live on YouTube and buy crypto. Yeah, that's nonsense. That's idiocy. Okay, hey, Alexius Like, I appreciate you coming in the chat, but like all you've done has been you've constantly talked about all these other channels. So if you're here to just talk about other people's channels, why are you at my chat, dude? Like you were doing this yesterday. It was all about going to all these other channels. If you don't like my channel, bro, then don't be in my channel. It's really annoying when people do that. They come to your chat, start spamming about other people's channels. And I'm not saying that channel is a bad channel. I like Herman. I promote Herman's book. I have it on my recommended reading list. But come on, dude. And I see we have a cheap audience tonight. That's okay. You guys don't have to give super chats, but yeah, check out the Dyer channel, bro. I mean, do you go to all those other channels and tell them to subscribe to me? Probably not. It's fine. I'm not mad. It's just, we're fighting to do well here, and got other people trying to I don't know. So notice how not wussified. I appreciate that. Notice how not wussified Sirach is. It's very practical. Remember all these people saying, we don't talk about practical stuff. It's all abstract theology. And yes, we will respond to Classical Theist's video. And by the way, his video wasn't polemical. Everybody's asking me, when are you going to respond, bro? Where you at? Where you at, dude? All right, I appreciate that, Alexius. Appreciate that. I'm not mad. It's just, I thought people were trying to spam all these other. So we had a guy when I started this up, he was trying to spam all this stuff. He had like 30 comments of spam. You're a shill. You're a shill. So I banned that dude. I forgot what I was gonna say. Anyway. Oh yes, I'm gonna respond to the video. It was just stating the Thomistic view anyway. It wasn't like it was some phenomenal response to Palimism, which is just the Orthodox doctrine from the time of, Dionysius to Basil to the Sixth Council to Maximus to John of Damascus, all the way up to Gregory Palamas. Right? We have the same doctrine all the way through. Latin theologians are the innovators, and it's not very hard to figure that out. So we're doing this practical stuff. We're seeing the continuity. Remember how we saw too how many times Jesus takes these texts from Sirach and reiterates these points. Paul quotes Sirach, right? I mean, there's a lot of continuity that we've been seeing between the Old and New Testament. Everyone will say to you, hey, bro, I'm your friend. But many of them are friends in name only. Exactly. Appreciate that. Yeah, no, the trads are weak, dude. They can't hang. That's all they have is to just say, to just name call. Like the best thing they could come up with the past couple of weeks is, you like your own tweets. So what? I've always done that. And I mean, to me, that's rational. If I put a comment up and I said it, I like it because I said it. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't have said it. That's the best argument that the trads have had in the last month. Dude, he likes his own tweets. They don't have anything else. They don't have any theological arguments, no responses. Anyway. But at least a couple of them are reading John Damascus. I don't know that they're understanding John Damascus, but they're at least reading it. Maybe we can get them to read Maximus the Confessor too. Let's see. So don't trust everybody who says they're your friend. Not everybody's a friend. Is it not a grief to the death when a companion and a friend turns to hating you? Yeah, that's one of the worst things, is to lose your friends. And then when friends become enemies, that's an awful thing. By the way, if you didn't hear the second half of the last talk, which was for subscribers, there were some really humorous sections in Sirach on thoughts. Yes, the Bible has a lot of anti-thought messagery in Sirach, which was pretty humorous if you got a chance to see that. Well, here come the super chats. Thank you, super chat crew. We'll get to those here in a minute. Evil reasoning. Why were you involved? Why are you covering the land with deceit? By the way, did you see the trads that were saying that they found a book review that I did, 7 years ago? Which was public, which I already addressed in a whole hour-long video. And they were like, dude, we got you. You're a Kabbalist Platonist. Never mind the fact that in the last 7 years, even the last 5 years, like the majority of the philosophic content has been against Platonism. Yeah. So that was a complete fail, backfire. All this stuff backfires because people just make assumptions and they won't actually reach out and have a conversation. I mean, have any of you changed your mind since 2012? Probably. I know I have. So what? Uncovered 7 year ago video exposed. But except it wasn't. It's public. And it was a book I read that compares like the Neoplatonic aspects of Kabbalism to allegorical biblical type stuff. Oh, big deal, dude. So anyway, the irony is that in the last couple weeks, there's a sister parish to my church, and somebody was asking questions about Kabbalism, and I was able, because I had read about this, to explain the fact that, well, look, Kabbalism, according to Gershom Scholem, is just Gnosticism. Scholem says this. So let's address this really briefly here while we're... And this is relevant because this section is actually talking about people who make up crap, right? Evil reasoning, people that are lying. And this is actually going to make these people look really dumb. Because I read not just this book, but actually multiple books by Scholem. Gershom Scholem, if you don't know, is the premier... Oh, come on, Amazon. Just stupid pop-ups on every damn site. It's a pop-up. The whole internet basically is just a pop-up. It's been that way for a long time now. Okay, so let's look at this here, this book. Now, low IQ people are going to say, oh, he's trying to get us to study Kabbalah. No, I'm telling you that Kabbalah is just Platonism and Gnosticism. How many videos have I made refuting Platonism and Gnosticism? Okay? But if you read Scholem, who is the premier Kabbalist scholar of the 20th century, in his books, pretty consistently, he will tell you that the origin of Kabbalah is Gnosticism. It's just another version of Platonism. Now, is that the same thing as Orthodoxy? No. I mean, I've done a whole lecture series on how it's not. Go listen to the Traditional Philosophy and Metaphysics series. So, there. It took like 1 minute to clear up that dumb lie. Which, if anybody had been following the material, they would know that. Another guy was like, some other guy was talking smack. He thinks I was I'm still a Roman Catholic. Like, I'm going to expose you, bro, because you're not even Orthodox. You're Roman Catholic. Yeah, it's all made up. Yeah. I haven't been inside a Roman Catholic church since 2006. It's probably the last 7. It's the last time I stepped inside one. Aside from like a tour of cathedral here in St. Augustine. I've been inside St. Augustine's cathedral like once or twice. Big deal. I didn't even go to the mass. The last mass I went to was like 2006 or 7, and it was a hip-hop mass. I'm not joking. And I was like, I'm never going back to that. I'm done. So, no, I'm not a Roman Catholic, and I haven't been since 2000. I haven't been one in a long time, but I haven't been inside a Catholic church since 2006 or 7. So this stuff is like way out of date, dude. And by the way, if you're just open about all your stuff, like, who cares? That's why I made that video explaining the whole journey, the process, and the thought process I had. And I talked about all this stuff. So just be open about all that stuff. And then like all of this gonna expose you type stuff, it's just funny. It doesn't even have any weight. So anyway, so you guys already know my vices and flaws because I've already talked about it. But that's what this section is talking about, dealing with people that, are lying about you and that kind of stuff. A companion delights in the gladness of a friend, but in a time of affliction, he will be against him. He's talking about losing your friends at times. A companion labors to help a friend for his stomach's sake, and in a time of battle, he will take up the shield. Do not forget a friend in your soul. Do not be unmindful of your friends. Don't be a fair weather friend. That sucks. Don't be unmindful of your friend if you have wealth. So if you've been successful and you can help your friends out, don't be a greedy gut, Scrooge, stingy man. Don't be test tube, gub, snail man. If you know the skit I'm talking about. Trex. Choosing wise counselors. Right. This is something very contrary to our age. Having a spiritual father, having a wise person that you can go to. Of course, this is very important in Orthodoxy. Everybody has, hopefully, if you are blessed enough, you have a spiritual father of some kind somewhere. In the world of out there being rebellious and an individual and all this stuff, you don't have wisdom. This is an age where we lack wisdom. But here we're saying use wisdom in choosing and finding a spiritual counselor. I want to remind you that I am not your spiritual counselor. I said this a couple weeks ago on Facebook. I'm not a priest. I'm not a religious minister. I am here to talk philosophy and worldviews. That's what my training is in. So I can direct you to finding one of those. I mean, I don't know all the spiritual fathers to find, but I'm just saying you exercise discretion and wisdom in finding one. And that's what the text is talking about here. Protect yourselves from a counselor. In other words, don't give yourself over like a cult. This is telling you to be guarded. Know beforehand what is his interest, for he will take thought for himself, lest he cast a vote against you, and say to you, your path is not good. So in other words, you have to have discretion and wisdom in choosing who you have as a spiritual guide, as a counselor, as a no, I'm not a spiritual father. I'm a dude. I'm a dude with a YouTube channel who reads a lot of books. And that's not the role of I'm just a layman like you guys are. So the role of a person who's a spiritual father, an elder, those kinds of things. If you want to read Herman's book, Precious Vessels, right? That tells you about the elders. That's the one role. Finding a spiritual father, all that. So you need to pray that you can find that. But, I'm not a cult leader. I don't run any kind of schismatic group or church on my own. I tell you to find a solid canonical Orthodox church. Because if you go to the non-canonical groups, you're going to find spooks, kooks, con men, and weirdos. So that doesn't guarantee that in every canonical church you're not going to find sinful people or corrupt people. There's no perfection in this world. So yes, so priests, monks, these are the people to look for spiritual fathers, not people on the internet. Bloggers, you're not going to find bloggers as spiritual fathers. Don't follow bloggers like cult leaders. So beware of who your counselor is. Hide your counsels from those who envy you. That's good advice. Yeah, don't say everything that you plan to do, because your enemies, people that envy you, will use that against you. Don't consult with a man who looks at you suspiciously. Don't consult with a coward about battle, with a merchant about prices in exchange. Don't consult with a buyer about selling. Don't consult with a slanderer about gratitude. Don't consult with an unmerciful man about generosity. Don't consult with an idle man about work. Don't consult with a hired servant about completing work. Don't consult with a lazy man about a big job. Don't consult or pay no attention to any of those clowns in counsel. Notice that this assumes then that you have the ability to make judgment calls. So making judgments is not always bad. Making a judgment call obviously is not bad or wrong. And people are saying, yes, it is very hard to find a wise spiritual guide, a spiritual counselor, spiritual father. It is very difficult. It took me a long time, and I met a couple people who were wise and older than me and have proven to be good guides. And that's part of the war that we've been in is, of course, the destruction of male authority, not just in the terms of like the family, but also in the spiritual realm. So that's part of the spiritual warfare is the corrupting of and destruction of male authority and power. And that's on purpose. But notice that you have to be able to make some assessments and judgment calls to avoid all these clowns, right? Because the clowns will lead you astray if you go to a bunch of clowns for advice. Think about how many clowns come to the head of movements, right? All the drama this week in the alt media world, a bunch of clowns. And why would you go to if people can't manage their personal lives, how are they going to lead movements? This is nonsense. And I'm not the leader of any movement, so I don't want to be. Never have wanted to be. That's not what I do. I like philosophy and making goofy videos and movies. That's what I'm into. Don't care about movements. Don't care about your ideological agendas, all this nonsense, because we don't live in that age anymore. Yeah, the biblical ASMR. Hear the paper. Pay no attention to any of the clowns. Instead, persevere with a godly man that you know keeps the commandments. So, first of all, when we're choosing a spiritual father, a wise guide, we look for somebody who keeps the commandments of God. Now, that doesn't mean perfectly. Nobody's going to be perfect, but people striving to do that, to do what's right. Okay. So that's our first criteria for finding a spiritual guide or father. And this applies to anything. Finding a priest or a church that's good. Stand firm on the counsel of your heart, for no one is more faithful to it than you. For a man's soul sometimes tells him more than 7 watchmen sitting on a high tower. So this is basically telling you that sometimes your intuition is good. If you're looking for a wise guide and your intuition tells you that they're a creeper, don't follow that dude. In all these matters, pray to God and he will direct your way into the truth. So trust God to lead you to the right church and to a right spiritual guide. Wisdom, falsehood, and truth. The word is the beginning of every work, and counsel comes before every action. 4 types of things appear as a clue to a change of heart: good and evil, life and death. It is the tongue that continually rules these. There is an astute man who teaches many, but is useless to his own soul. Right? So anyone who purports to teach, who tries to help others, this is really applicable to me, right? I mean, if I try to tell people what to do and try to talk about truth and falsehood, I have to be leery, lest I make mistakes myself and I don't listen to my own words of advice. A man who devises words craftily will be hated. This man will go hungry, for grace was not given to him from God, because he is destitute of all wisdom. There is a man wise in his soul, and the fruits of his understanding are trustworthy when he speaks. A wise man will instruct his own people, and the fruits of understanding are trustworthy. The fruits of his understanding are trustworthy. A wise man will be filled with blessing, and all those who see him will consider him blessed. The life of a man is numbered by days, but the days of Israel are without number. The wise man will inherit trust amongst his people, and his name will live forever. Now we have a warning about gluttony, namely, again, self-control here. And this is kind of forgotten, especially in America. Everybody thinks about sexual sins. What about gluttony, dude? I see a lot of fat people in basically every church in the West. Big old fatties, gigantic guts, gigantic people. And you know they're all thinking in their head, you better not be having sex with so-and-so. Meanwhile, they're gobbling down giblets and goblets of wine. Well, I guess if they're Baptists, they're gobbling down goblets of Jolt Cola or something. But gluttony is bad too, bro. While you are living, test your soul and see what is bad for you, and do not give in to that. For not everything is profitable for you. Not every soul enjoys everything. Do not be gluttonous for dainty foods. Do not give yourself over to foods. For overeating will bring you sickness. Gluttony will lead to nausea. Many have died because of gluttony. Be careful. The careful man will prolong his life. Going to doctors. A lot of people don't know that Wisdom of Sirach tells you to go to the doctor. Now, not talking about going to the Rockefeller medical establishment. It's a big scam. But a true physician. The office of the physician. Tradition says St. Luke was a physician. Honor the doctor, the physician, with the honor that's due to him, and also according to your need. For the Lord created the doctor. Healing comes from the Most High, and it comes through doctors. Not always, but can. So there's a place for doctors. The physician's skill will lift up his head, and he will be admired in the presence of the great. God created medicines from the earth, and the sensible man will not loathe them. How stupid it is of these dumb cults and sects that think that medicines and doctors don't come from God. It's utterly ridiculous. And there are cults and sects that believe this. Is not water made sweet by wood, that its strength might be known? For God gave skill to men, that he might be glorified in their wonders. By doctors, God heals and takes away pain. The druggist makes a compound out of these herbs and things, right? For God's works are never finished, and from them he makes health upon the face of the earth. How obvious is that? God creates doctors. Now, that doesn't mean that Big Pharma is your friend and that you need to... No, this is talking about a legitimate physician, okay? They didn't have Big Pharma in Sirach's day. My son, do not be negligent when you're sick. Pray to God and he will heal you. Depart from your sins and direct your hands to God. Cleanse your heart from your sins. Offer a sweet-smelling sacrifice and a memorial from the finest wheat flour. Pour your offerings out as if you are soon to die, and keep in touch with the physician. For God created the doctor, and do not let the doctor leave you, for you need him. For there is a time when success is also in the hands of the doctor. For the doctor may also pray to the Lord to give him success in bringing relief and healing for the sake of preserving your life. For he who sins before the one who made him may fall into the hands of a physician. So, common sense, wise words there. But how many dumb cults don't know this? Funerals. See how this touches on every aspect of life. My son, let your mourning be for the dead. So it's appropriate to mourn for the dead. Biblical law has always had this present there. And as one suffering grievously, begin the lament. Take care for the burial of your friend. Weep bitterly for him. Lament. Do your mourning according to what he deserves. For a day or two, let it be so, to avoid slander. And then be comforted for your grief. For grief can be a cause of death. So don't be overly grievous. Don't grieve for endless periods. Do it for a few days and then move on. The life of a poor man, grief abides in misery. The life of a poor man weighs down his heart. Do not give your heart over to grief. Drive it away, remembering the end of life. So we're all going to die. No point in spending all your days grieving. Do not forget there is no coming back. The dead can't come back it's not talking about the resurrection. He's just talking about in this life, you can't come back. or no, I lost my place. For you will only injure yourself. Remember my end, since yours is also like it. I die today, you die tomorrow. When the dead man is at rest, let his remembrance cease, and be comforted for him. By the way, we got 220. That's good. That's good. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, nerds. We're on Sirach chapter 38. When the dead man is at rest, let his remembrance cease, and be comforted for him and for the exodus of his spirit. Notice, some goofuses believe that the Old Testament texts don't teach that there's a soul or a spirit. Yes, they do. I mean, how many times does this come up in the Psalms? Just nonsense. Like a Sadducee type view. The wisdom of a scribe depends on his opportunity for quiet. When he has little business, he will be made wise. So there's a place for the scholar, for the scribe, you see. Nothing wrong with giving oneself to academic scholarly pursuits. That's an appropriate aspect and function of society, in a healthy society. How will the man who handles the plow be made wise? Not everybody's made to be a day laborer on a farm. Some people have high IQs, and they should be studying and learning and doing academia. Of course. The wisdom of the scribe depends on his opportunity. How will the plowshare be wise? For he boasts of the shaft of the plow. He drives the oxen, and he's occupied with day labor. His talk is about bulls, right? Nothing wrong with being a day laborer or farmer, but not everybody has the same function, gifts, talents, abilities, right, and profession. The plowshare is his heart is set on plowing and farming. The same is true for the craftsman or for the architect. They work day and night on their craft. Or the man who engraves signets and seals. Freemasonry! It's a Freemason! He is diligent with his craft. Nothing wrong with being an artisan or a craftsman. But again, not everybody's made for that. Then he goes on to get more examples. The blacksmith, etc. The potter. All these different artisans, crafts. Blah, blah, blah. Without all of these artisans, the city itself as a whole is not livable. So everybody has different gifts, talents, abilities, skills, and that's how the society works together organically. That's how the city is livable. Nobody will live there if you don't have this whole kind of symbiotic relationship between all these areas of life. Yet they will not be sought out for the counsel of the people. Okay, so you don't go to artisans and craftsmen. This is reminiscent of Plato's Apology here, this section in chapter 38. None of these people run the city. They don't have the wisdom and the philosophy for that. Wise men run the city. Wise men make great judges. They sit in the assembly. They pass sentence on situations, disciplines, judgments, criminals. They keep the fabric of society stable. Notice how this is not a revolutionary treatise. Society is not made stable by a bunch of revolutionary idiots. Society is made healthy and stable by people doing and functioning in society according to their gifts, talents, skills, and abilities. Kind of a no-brainer, but all of modernity is built on the inverse of this. You know what I mean? Being a student of Scripture, chapter 39. How different is the man who devotes himself to the study of God's law? He will seek out the wisdom of all the ancients. You see, this is why theology is the queen of these skills, gifts, sciences. It's above even philosophy, right? So this is set against all the craftsmen. Nothing wrong with being a craftsman. Nothing wrong with doing those things. that's what you're made to do, that's what you love to do, go for it, brah. But to be preoccupied with prophecies, with Scripture, the wisdom of the ancients, is a great gift and blessing. The man who loves theology is talking about will seek out the discourses of notable men. This is why I have a giant library of thousands of books. It's because I wanted to do this. This is what piqued my interest. The wise man seeks out the hidden meanings of Proverbs. How many people do this? How many people are seeking out what really matters? Seeking the truth. Now, I'm not saying that makes me great. That's up to God ultimately to decide. But I'm saying that is the proper attitude. Not chasing sports ball nonsense. That's the biggest idol in America is sports ball. But chapter 39, that's what a man should be doing. The man who seeks out the hidden meanings of Proverbs and is engaged in solving the mysteries of the ancients and the parables will serve in the presence of great men. He will appear before rulers, and he will travel through the lands of foreign nations. He will test the good and the evil amongst all men. And he will arise early to give his heart to studying. He will rise early to give his heart before the Lord who created him, and will make supplication before God, and will open his mouth in prayer and make supplication for his sins. If the Lord wills, this man will be filled with the spirit of understanding. He will pour forth words of wisdom, and in his prayer he will give thanks to the Lord. He will direct his counsel and knowledge aright, and he will reflect on hidden things. He will reveal instruction and teaching. He will boast of the law of God's covenant. That's what we seek to do here. I definitely fall short of a lot of this, but that's what we seek to do here. Many will praise his understanding, and it will never be blotted out. His memory will not disappear. His name will live throughout all generations. So, by the way, so people say, why do you have saints? Well, this is talking about saints. I'm not saying I'm a saint. Not far from it. I'm saying that this section is talking about elders, saints, that kind of role, that kind of office. Nations will proclaim the wisdom of the godly theologian, and the assembly will proclaim his praise. Now notice the theologian, as it says, is not the guy who has just bare intellect. The theologian is the guy who wakes up and prays, is what the text says. If this man lives long, he will have a name greater than 1,000. And if he goes to his rest, his work will be complete. I have many more things to tell you, and I will describe them in detail, for I am filled like a moon, like a full moon. Hear me, O sons, O holy sons, bud forth like the rose, springing up by a running stream, like frankincense emit a sweet fragrance. Blossom forth like a lily, send forth a fragrance, and sing a hymn of praise. Bless God in all of his works, ascribe majesty to his name, and give thanks to him in praise, with songs on your lips. Thus you will say in thanksgiving, all things are the work of God, for they are exceedingly good. Every command shall be in his appointed time. No one can say, what is this or why is that? For every question will be answered in God's time. This is a good one for people that are bugged with theological issues. Of course, this has been a thing with me. I've always been plagued by these kinds of issues. And an interesting thing that you'll notice in your life is that sometimes if you have a really curious, difficult theological question or issue, you won't find the right book or essay or paper or answer for many months, maybe years. But at the appointed time, you will find it. I've had this happen countless times in my life. And ultimately, that's in God's providence. And that's what this text is saying here in 39:16. Every question will be answered in his appointed time. So this also applies to the whole atheist thing where they're like, why does God permit evil if God's all-knowing and all-good? Well, God is not inclined or obligated to give us an answer to that question. Right? There's no moral reason why God has to answer that question to us in this life. And in fact, because we're finite, we can't even understand it in this life. That's the answer given to Job when Job essentially asked that question. So in our worldview, that is not any inherent contradiction, because there's no moral obligation for God to explain to us everything. And in fact, the text here says that every question will be answered in the appointed, appropriate, proper time. So that also applies to the so-called problem of evil. By God's word, the waters stood up. This is talking about the Exodus. The reservoirs were of the waters by the word of his mouth. He commanded, and all things were done. Nothing will diminish his salvation. The works of all flesh are before him. Nothing can be hidden from God's eyes. Notice here we have the omniscience of God. From age to age, he looks upon all things. Nothing is marvelous to him. No new facts. So he's all-knowing, omnipotent, omniscient. What is this? Why is that? For all things are created for their appointed uses. God's blessing covers the dry land like a river, and it drenches like a flood. He turns fresh waters into salt. The heathen will inherit his wrath. His ways are straight to the holy, for they are an occasion of stumbling to the lawless. Yes, the Bible, scriptures, the law, if you're wicked, you can't understand them, and you stumble over these. The Bible becomes a thing where you screw up. And how many of the stupid sects do this? They can't understand the scriptures. There are spirits that were created as vengeance, for chastisement, and in God's anger, they strengthen their scourges. Right? We see this in Scripture with the avenging angel, the angels that come and chastise. Right? Many times in Scripture we see this. And in his anger, I read that. In the time of consummation, they at the appointed time, they will pour out their might. They will appease the wrath of him who made them. Fire, hail, famine, death. Right? Think of the apocalypse. Right? The angels are the ones that essentially govern the universe under God, and they put into practice, into action, those judgments. The angels will be glad at his commandment. They will be prepared for his service on earth. When the time comes, they will not transgress. From the beginning, I was determined and resolved to leave this in writing. It's an interesting text. Let's see. Here, the note in the Orthodox Study Bible says, here Ben Sirach inserts a brief autobiographical comment. God is great in working his redemption and salvation, which he accomplishes through the Son. The works of God are good, and he will supply every need at the appointed hour. No one can say this is worse than that thing, for all things happen in their appointed time. So here we have the providence of God. Nothing happens outside the providence of God. Chapter 40, life's afflictions. Hard work is created for every man. A heavy yoke and a burden of the sons of Adam. That suggests that Eve and Adam and Genesis and the fall were historical. Of course they were. From the day that every man came forth from their mother's womb to the day that they returned to the mother of all, namely the earth, dust, the conception of all things comes to decay and death. Trouble and thoughts cause fear of heart. For the one sitting on a throne, the king, down to the one humbled in earth and ashes, were all appointed to death. That is the result of the fall. And again, Eden and the fall are not allegories here. They're real events. By the way, Jesus obviously treats Adam, Eve, Eden, Satan, and the fall as actual events. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's pretty much a no-brainer. And anybody who adopts higher criticism, if you're consistent, there's the doorway. Leave the religion. So let's see. He's going on to talk about people who, in this life, basically, we are living under the curse, under the fall. This life is bad, but he says, if you're a sinner, if you're wicked, this life is 7 times worse. For the wicked man, there's death, bloodshed, strife, sword, distress, famine, ruin, affliction. These are, in fact, for the lawless. These things are chastisements. You hear that? These things are for the lawless. And because of the lawless, the flood came. So these horrible things happen to humble you so that you return to God. And if you don't, then more horrible things may happen, or you might just be given over to, and it doesn't matter anymore. Right? Paul talks about this being given over to reprobate, being reprobate. God does this with Pharaoh, if you remember, right? It says God hardens Pharaoh's heart, and then a few chapters later in Exodus, it says Pharaoh hardened his heart. So the way that God hardened Pharaoh's heart was by giving him up to his own desires, further and further and further. The wise and the unwise. Every bribe and wrongdoing will be blotted out, but faithfulness will stand forever. The wealth of the unrighteous will dry up like a river and sound forth and cease like great thunder in the rain. A generous man will rejoice, however. Transgressors will come to ruin, for the offspring of the ungodly will not grow branches. They are unclean roots on a hard rock. Weeds growing by any water or riverbank will be plucked out before the grass. Grace is like a paradise in blessing, and almsgivings endure for forever. So when you give alms, that endures forever. The life of the self-reliant and the worker will be sweet, but he who finds a treasure is better off than both. Having children and building a city establishes a name, but a blameless wife is accounted better than both. Wine and music gladden the heart, but the love of wisdom is better than wine and music. Flute and harp give sweet melody, but the pleasant tongue is better than both. The eye will desire grace and beauty, but the green shoots of grain are better than both. So some things are better than other things, obviously. All right, we've been going, hour, 20 minutes? We'll do some more here. A friend and a companion meet at an appointed time, but a wife meeting with her husband is better than both. Yeah, your wife is better than your bros. Brothers are a help for a time of affliction, but almsgiving rescues better than both. Gold and silver make the foot secure, but wise counsel is more valuable than gold and silver. Wealth and strength will lift up hearts. This is putting things into perspective, right? Gold, silver, there's nothing wrong with those things, but better to have wisdom even than gold and silver. So we should put our priorities in the right order, is the whole point of this. Fear of the Lord is better than both of those things. There is no loss in the fear of the Lord, and with it, there is no need to seek help, for the fear of the Lord is like a paradise of blessing. So we have the theme. Notice we just had the fall and being banished from Eden as the theme in the previous chapter. Now he's talking about likening returning to God to paradise. So fall, Exodus, paradise. The fear of the Lord is like a covering that covers man better than any glory. My child, do not live the life of a beggar, for it is better to die than to be a beggar. For when a man looks at another man's table, he is living an irrational life. He will pollute his soul with another man's food. But a rational and educated man will guard himself against all this. Notice, nothing wrong with being rational, nothing wrong with being educated. Now, those aren't the greatest, most important things, but notice he's been telling you this, that there's like gradations in life. Don't get caught in dialectics and think that, if you're educated, that's automatically a bad thing. It can be good or bad. But knowing God is more important than being educated. But that doesn't make education bad. Right? Come on, it's common sense. Begging will be sweet in the mouth of a shameless man, but in his belly a fire will be kindled. O death, how bitter is your memory, and to a man of peace with his possessions, to a man without distractions and prosperous, and still strong enough to enjoy his food, death, your judgment is good. To the man in need and failing in strength, in his extreme old age, he is distracted by everything, and stubborn and short on patience. Do not fear the judgment of death. Remember those before you and after you. For this is the judgment from God upon all flesh. How can you reject the good pleasure of God? Whether you live 10, 100, or 1,000 years, in Hades there is no inquiry into your life. The children of sinners are loathsome, and they frequent the dwellings of the ungodly. But the inheritance of the inheritance of the children of sinners will perish. Their seed will be a disgrace. They will continue on the line of the ungodly. Woe to you, ungodly men, who forsook God's law. And when you are born, you will be born into a curse. And when you die, you will get the portion of the curse. Whatever is from the earth returns to the earth, and from a curse goes forth. The ungodly go from a curse to destruction, but the name of the evil will be blotted out. So here's prophecies of like the final judgment, right? But we're told, of course, not to fear death because of the resurrection. So Christ destroyed the power of death in his resurrection, and this is why all men will be resurrected. That doesn't mean all men are going to be saved, though. So how we live this life will determine our experience in the next life. We're all going to be resurrected, but the experience of that resurrection, whether to eternal goodwill or eternal ill will, is based on the way that we operate in this life. Observe instruction and live in peace. I'm sorry, I skipped a part. Have regard for your name, for it will remain with you longer than 10,000 chests of gold. For the days of good life are numbered, but a good name will remain for forever. Observe instruction and live in peace, my children, for hidden wisdom and invisible treasure. What benefit are these? A man who hides his foolishness is better than a man who hides his wisdom. Therefore, be ashamed on the basis of my word, for it is not good to protect every kind of shame, and not everything is highly esteemed with all confidence. Be ashamed of fornication before father and mother. Be ashamed of a lie before your leader or your ruler. Be ashamed of an offense before a judge or a king. Lawlessness before the assembly of the people. Of wrongdoing before your partner or friend. Be ashamed of theft before the place where you dwell. Be ashamed of before the truth of God and his law and his covenant. And be ashamed of bad manners at a table. Be ashamed of looking at whores. Be ashamed of silence before those who greet you. Be ashamed of rejecting the appeal of your flesh and blood, your kinsfolk. Be ashamed of carrying off somebody's portion of gift. So notice, the point here is that shame is appropriate. It's wrong to think that if we can just get rid of all forms of shame, that we'll be happy and healthy. No, part of actually being healthy and living a fruitful life is experiencing legitimate shame when you do wrong. And that's what this whole section is telling you, that there's appropriate shame for these actions. So again, if you're listening, this is Jay Dyer, Jay's Analysis. You can get my book here, Esoteric Hollywood. Part 2 is out. Been out for a few months now. You can get that at Jay's Analysis. You can support my site by subscribing at the website in the subscription section. And you get part 2 of all of the talks, lectures, interviews, podcasts, and so forth. We're doing the book of Sirach because we had so many requests over the last few years of doing too many deep philosophical things and not enough practical stuff. And I thought, what better practical book to do than Sirach, which has been essentially removed from the Protestant biblical canon. So it also shows us kind of, what's missing, what you've lost in the Protestant West that is still part of and regularly read, of course, in Orthodoxy. And of course, yes, the Roman Catholic Church also has the book of Sirach, to be fair. And we are looking at this section talking about appropriate shame, right? There are situations, times where shame is appropriate. Society has to have some things that it shames to function. You can't have a society functioning with no shame. There has to be boundaries. There has to be common conceptions of right and wrong for any society to function. That's just common sense, right? Do not be insulting after you make a gift to someone Do not repeatedly tell and reveal secrets. So be truly modest, and you will find favor before all men. Okay, let's see. So we've done almost 10. We'll do one more chapter, and I'll do the super chats, and then we have, for the subscribers, the last few chapters, the last 8 or 9 chapters for subscribers. All right, so chapter 42, do not be ashamed of the following things. Do not let partiality lead you into sin. Don't be ashamed of God's law and covenant. Don't be ashamed of a judgment to acquit an ungodly man. Wait. Okay, these are the things to not be ashamed of. Keeping accounts with a partner or a traveling companion. So it's good to have just money dealings. Don't be ashamed of having a balanced ledger, as Solomon says. Don't be ashamed of dividing an inheritance amongst your friends. Don't be ashamed of accurate scales and balances. All right, so be just in your monetary dealings. Don't be ashamed of much discipline for your children. Don't be ashamed of making the sides of an evil servant bleed. There's a place at times for corporal punishment. Typically, he's speaking of kids when he says this. Don't be ashamed of making profit in your business accounts. So nothing wrong with profits, but again, of course, we have many, many warnings about greed. So profit in itself is not bad. We are not Marxists. But greed is just like gluttony, a sin, a passion that will rule us if we don't rule it. Where there is an evil wife, a seal is good. Where there are many hands, locks are good. Whatever you deliver, do it by number or weight, and put everything into writing. Do not be ashamed of instructing the unwise and foolish, and of the extremely old man who passes judgment on the young. So if you're an old man and he makes a judgment about young people, listen to what he's saying because he knows what's up. Then you will be, when you do all this, you will be truly instructed, and you will be wise and approved before men. If a daughter keeps her father secretly wakeful. So fathers are worried about daughters becoming hoes and thoughts. Worry over her takes away his sleep. Lest in her youth she passes her time and she doesn't get married and parties, and then her marriage becomes hatred. In her virginity she is perhaps defiled. She becomes pregnant in her father's house. Perhaps she will be unfaithful to her husband. Perhaps if she's married, she'll be childless. These are some of the worries of a father. Keep a strict watch over your headstrong daughter, lest she make you into a laughingstock and a source of gossip in your city, and become notorious amongst the people. Watch out for a thought daughter, and a disgrace before the multitude. Don't look upon women for beauty. Do not sit in the midst of a lot of women, for as the moth comes out of garments, so the evil of a woman comes from a woman. The evil of a man is better than a woman who does what is good, yet brings shame and disgrace. Woo. That's what the text says. Let the text just reporting what the text says. Now we remember the works of God's law, the works of his hands. I will describe his works that I see. The sun gives light and looks down upon everything, and its work is of God's glory. The Lord did not enable his saints to describe all of his wonders, which God established. So we don't know. We don't know all the works of God. There are energies and operations of God beyond what we know. God traced out the abyss and the human heart. He understands human heart's craftiness, for the Most High possesses all knowledge. He sees into the signs of the age, so he even knows the zeitgeist. I'm not talking about Peter Joseph. He proclaims what has been and what will be. He reveals the footsteps of hidden things. No thought escapes God. Not even one word is hidden from him. He has adorned the mighty works of his wisdom for he is from everlasting to everlasting. Nothing can be added or taken away, and he needs no one to be his counselor. How precious are his works. All these things live and endure forever, and every need, and all things are obedient to him. Divine providence, right? All things come in pairs, one opposite to the other. No dialectics, no Eastern yin-yang. God made all these things. One thing strengthens the good of another, and who can have enough of beholding his glory? And then he moves into the exaltation of creation, sun, moon, and stars. Again, so much of the Bible is invalidated if we don't believe in creation. All right, so that is we've got, 9 more chapters to go, and then we will be done with Sirach. And hopefully we have given practical insight according to the many requests for practical stuff. And we'll read some super chats. Misty earns $1. Thank you, Misty. Appreciate that. Acrobatic Jesus, $4.99. You the man, Jay. No, you're the man, Acrobatic Jesus. Appreciate that. Thank you. Baltic Bear, $10. Thank you, Baltic Bear. Much appreciated. Moses Ursus, $5. Cool name there. It's like Ursus, Moses Ursus. Really cool name. J. Crew Bug, $5. Weird name, but thank you, J. Crew Bug. Elias Callisto, $1.99. Keep up the good work, and thanks for all that you do. Thank you, Elias. Appreciate that. You keep me going. Annika Green, $9.99. Thank you very much, Annika. Much appreciated. I like those fat super chats. And also from Hunter, I see that Orthodox steak cap thumbs up guy. That's me, I guess. 19 pounds. Or 19 inverted E's. Full Metal American, $5. Keep up the fight. We intend to. Thank you, Full Metal American, for that. David Singh, $20. How does one balance between legalism and grace, or is it a false dialectic? Maybe I've got the second term wrong, legalism. No, I mean, look, the best way to answer this question, David, I would say is look at the Gospels. And I keep going back to this because it keeps coming up, like in all these, you see all these debates, and people were like, what happens if I was raised Protestant? And what about my grandmother who died Baptist? And so all of these questions come up. And especially in Orthodoxy, what about the calendars? What about this? What about that? And there's all these questions that people get really legalistic, and there's a lot of rigor. And what do we see in the Gospels? How does Jesus usually answer this question? There's Pharisees and there's Sadducees. Okay, so there's two extremes. This is constant in the Gospels. And every time I read the Gospels, it's hammered home. 4 weeks ago, what was the reading? John 4, Jesus talking to the woman at the well. The woman at the well is a schismatic. And even in the readings, the theology was explained to us. The reading was for the, it's sung, obviously, in the liturgy. But for the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. She's a schismatic, it says in the readings. How does Jesus speak to her? Well, he doesn't do either extreme. So he doesn't go to the extreme of like, oh, believe whatever you want to, it doesn't matter, right? Which would be the liberal extreme. But he doesn't go to the rigorous Pharisee extreme, because he shouldn't even be interacting with her at all, because she's surprised. She says, you, a Jew, talk to me, a Samaritan? But Jews have no dealings with Samaritans because we're unclean. We're schismatics. Remember Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan? Why was that such a scandal? Because he's telling the Pharisees that the schismatic did better, because he actually helped the person and the self-righteous people didn't. So that we consistently see in scriptures this warning of both extremes. But, and I'm not advocating liberalism, obviously. I'm not saying that you get a free pass if you're a Sadducee. But who does Jesus say gets the worst condemnation between a Pharisee and a Sadducee? A Pharisee. So even though the Pharisees are correct theologically, in Matthew 23, Jesus says, yes, the Pharisees add traditions. This is bad. But he says the Pharisees did have the authority, and they sat in the seat of Moses. So he says, obey what they say, but not what they do, for they don't do what they say. But they were the legitimate authorities, not the Sadducees. The Sadducees were the higher critical liberals who didn't believe in angels, miracles, or the resurrection or the soul. So Jesus reserves the strictest condemnation for the self-righteous Pharisees. But that doesn't mean that you can be an unbelieving Pharisee. He rebukes them and calls them fools too. So what I'm saying is that it is correct to say that the Orthodox Church is the true church. As he tells the woman at the well, salvation is of the Jews. There's only one church. You have to convert. It's incumbent upon you. But at the same time, you can't have this extreme self-righteous, rigorous attitude, especially not in an age of so much religious confusion. So there's a balanced position that's appropriate to take. If you look at the history of the church, there's a lot of economia, a lot of decisions that are made about, how to bring people in, what's the right thing to do in this situation. And any situation that gets extremely overly legalistic just turns God into a miser, and they get really harsh, and they view God like he is a miser. And that ends up becoming self-destructive to the sect and the schismatic group itself. So I would say the balance between legalism and grace is best shown in the way Jesus treats those two extremes of the Pharisee and the Sadducee. Baltic Bear, $5. Have you ever read Ayn Rand? I have. I'm midway through Atlas Shrugged, and I don't really want to finish it because the worldview put forth in it is kind of disgusting. Yeah, I mean, it kind of is, but, you can read anything. Well, not anything, but, when it comes to like books like that deal with philosophy or literature or whatever, I mean, you can read anything and look at it for what it is, right? You don't have to imbibe the worldview just because you're reading the book. And when I was in college and undergrad, you had to read all kinds of stuff that I couldn't stand. There's pros and cons to that. So you do get forced. The one good thing about college, is that you get forced to read a bunch of stuff. I wouldn't recommend going to college, but you get forced to read a bunch of stuff that you wouldn't normally and get exposed to new ideas. So, I wouldn't say that you have to burn the book or something. If you're afraid that the book is going to pervert your mind or something, maybe don't read it. But I don't think you have to not read it. But the worldview there is pretty elitist and atheistic, obviously. But at the same time, could there be things that we garner from Ayn Rand? Yeah, she does have some insights at times. It's not like it's all wrong. Capitalism, communism, this kind of stuff, it's just dialectics. So both sides are going to have correct points, and both sides are going to have incorrect points. Let's see. Mr. Madden, 2 A's. Debate Destiny, the Twitch streamer on religion. Okay, well, this has come up like 20,000 times. I've already said I would love to debate Destiny. There was an email where Destiny said he would do it, and then I never heard back. So there's a whole crop of people who have in emails said they would be willing to do debates, and then they never replied back. So I'm not chasing down people to do debates. You can either make your mind up to do it or not. I feel like if they really wanted to do it, it would happen. So Josh Garcia, $5. Hey man, do you have any thoughts on beards and shaving? Why Catholics shave and Orthodox grow beards? Is shaving wrong for Orthodox? This is adiaphora. It's tradition, little t tradition. But no, I wouldn't say it's obviously not a part of our salvation. This would be a great example of what the guy was saying earlier, about legalism. If somebody thought that was part of your salvation, that would be absurd and legalistic, right? That would be being a Pharisee. But I think it is typically a good thing to do. But in the West, we don't have situations where everybody has the freedom to grow a beard. Now, I don't always do it because I just don't want to. But no, I think the ancient canons do talk about men having beards and this kind of stuff. But again, a lot of the canons, you can't take all the ancient canons and just copy and paste them to today. That's why it requires wisdom, right? Just like with Proverbs, just like with the law of God. Look, it's the day in which we live is no different than Jesus' day. It's literally no different. Cults, sects, Pharisees, and Sadducees. You see that everywhere. And by the way, not everybody's icon has a beard. So typically icons of St. Justin Martyr, he doesn't have a beard, or he has a little bit Magnum PI Shadow or whatever. So this is not that big of a deal. But now, if we lived in the Byzantine world, typically men would have beards. Yes, and that's because the ancient canons do talk about beards. But it's not a salvific issue, obviously. I mean, could anybody honestly read St. Paul and think that, like, you got to have a beard to be saved or something? That's just ridiculous. AD, 10, but good question. AD, $10 or 10 pounds. I listened to your talk with James Kelly about the Franks from 2013. Very amazing. Cool. Would you consider the role of Venice in that time seriously? Yes. So Italy and the Franks are essentially what would become the Renaissance power. I haven't figured out the relationship yet between Venice and the Franks, except that Venice is obviously the Venetian banking trade route type of thing going on, and so there's a Templar thing that's going on there. That's a big part of this. We touched on this a little bit in the interview with Eric that I did a couple weeks ago, the Illuminate Confirm, where we talked about Templars, Masonry, and Weishaupt. So that would play into this. I think Tarpley is correct in that essay about the Venetians and that stuff. I'm not advocating everything he says, but I do think he's right about that. So there is some truth to this. There's some connection between Italy. He's right when he talks about Paolo Sarpi. Sarpi was a spy. I think all that stuff's true, as best I can tell. But I'm also not a expert historian in that time period. I know much more about the Church Fathers, the first 800 years, than I do about the Renaissance period. I mean, I've read multiple books on the Renaissance, but I'm by no means any kind of Renaissance expert. But I do think that there's some truth to this Frankish thesis. I do think the Franks were a big problem. The easiest way to demonstrate that is to look at the fact that, number one, St. Photius's letter, which is in the Dionysius Dragus article on the 8th Ecumenical Council, cites Photius's letter blaming the Franks for the Filioque. So it wasn't Romanides that cooked up the Frankish thesis. It's from St. Photius. I keep making this point over and over and over. People seem to not be aware of this. Anyway, so there is some connection between the Franks, which then seem to make the papacy a tool. This is where you get the big changes in the Latin Church from Orthodoxy. This is what St. Photius says. He says the Franks did this. Then he blames Frankish missionaries in Bulgaria for spreading the Filioque. It's in Photius's letter. This is not cooked up by Romanides. It's correct that the Byzantines considered themselves Romans. That's true. If you look at the Avignon papacy, obviously this is absurd. 3 different people in the Great Western Schism claiming to be the Pope in France. How would anybody believe that this has a continuity with the first millennium of the church? I mean, if you just thought about this alone refutes the papacy. Now, I know the papists will have like a million different answers to every single question to wiggle around everything. I know that. But what I'm saying is that, and I know that they believe that, but only one of the guys was the actual successor. I know that. I know all that. I'm just making the point that the absurdity of thinking Peter's throne is in Avignon, France, in some giant palace is absurd. So, yes, that's a long answer to that question. But I haven't figured out all the different relationships between what's going on between Templars, Venice, and the Merovingians and all that. Those are mysteries that I've not solved. Aristozenos, $5. Thanks, Jay. Thank you, Aristozenos. All right. I don't see any more super chats. Great talk tonight with you guys. Thanks for hanging out with me. Had a good chat. Thank God that we're still here because, of course, YouTube is a great tool. I pray that we continue to have this tool as long as we can. It's a lot of fun. I've had so much fun doing YouTube the last several years. I want to be able to keep doing it. We've had a lot of growth. Great to hit 40,000. Let's move on towards 50, 60 to 100. Maybe we can do that in the next couple of years, Lord willing. God bless you guys. And if you want to hear the second half, which, as we said, will be the last 8 or 9, 10 chapters of Sirach, and we'll be done with Sirach. And then we're going to move on to this little specimen global book Frito Capricorn, Frito Corn Dogs, Frito Corn Chip, Turning Point. Scientism meets New Age. All right, God bless you guys. Have a good night. By the way, I might actually stream later tonight just for fun because I want to meet the criterion on the Twitch channel, which is I got to do, I don't know, a few more hours of streaming and do it different days. And I think I've hit most of the tiers that you got to hit, except a couple more to be, damn it, to be monetized or whatever. And I just want to have that as a backup. And you don't have to remind, yes, I know that, dude, all of these services are going to be, they'll censor you there. I know that. There's no place you can go where you're not going to be possibly censored. I mean, where can you go? I don't know. But if I play Kingdom Hearts or Hitman, might play Hitman. That's pretty fun. James Bond type stuff. A lot of propaganda in Hitman, by the way. But yeah, it's like Medicare. I play boomer games. So if you want to hang out with me and chat while I play something later, I may or may not. I don't know. Kind of tired, but I would like to build up that Twitch channel. That could be useful in the future. Then you can find me at my Twitch, which I will put here in the chat. And don't forget, as we said, the event in Austin, June 2nd. Boiler Room will be there. Aaron and Melissa will be there. The theater premiere at Alamo Drafthouse of Minds of Men, their amazing film. Look for me in their next couple projects. Can't say what those projects are, but perhaps look for me in them. And here is my Twitch channel if you want to, if you're not doing anything later tonight, you can switch on over to the Twitch. And you could follow me there in the link. And maybe we'll play some Hitman. Maybe we'll play some Kingdom Hearts and chat there. I don't know. We'll see. But thank you guys. Fun chat. Have a good night. God bless.